Now I'd just like to turn it to a little bit of thinking about having been your father's son.
Hmm.
I know your father you've mentioned gives a lot of speeches. I
Yes.
know he's done a lot of interviews.
Hmm.
Have you watched any of his interviews that are on
Oh,
tape?
absolutely, yeah.
So you've heard the whole story from
Oh, yeah.
beginning to end
In fact,
in detail by this time.
I know more about some people who died 75 years ago than I know about a lot of my relatives today. That's basically the way it is.
And he was always very open with you. If you watched something and had a
Mhm.
question, you could ask him.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you feel that you really sort of know what his experiences were when he was basically from the age of 11 to 19. You know what his experiences were. Is there anything in particular about what he went through that upsets you the most?
That upsets me the most. Well, there is the story of his bar mitzvah, which of course was illegal under German rule in Poland. And one day he was going for his lesson, and his rabbi. And by the way, I've met his rabbi's son. He came to our house one time for Passover. When we were in Israel, we went to his house. His rabbis, his rabbi, he found his rabbi surrounded in the courtyard by a group of German soldiers, and his rabbi told him to run. He heard shots, and that was the last he ever saw of him. And my father's bar mitzvah was held in secret in the ghetto. They, put blankets up and curtains up so that nobody would be able to see, and that was how that was done. As far as really disturbing stuff, like I said, we had in the house, we had bars of soap that were made from human fat. They were stamped RJF, which is German for Reinjudenfat.
So when did you know what they were? When you were a young child?
Oh yeah, when I was a young child, my father told me exactly what it was.
And that must have upset you as a young child.
Uh, yeah, I'm not sure how much it upset me, but when you're a child, you don't exactly think of the mechanics of it, but you know that it's pretty gruesome that this is made from people.
As an adult now, do you think that what your father went through, the brutalization, the starvation, etc., has affected his health as he's gotten older?
Oh, I'm sure of it. Oh, I'm sure of it. Yeah, absolutely. Because he had for how many years he was malnourished. His growth was stunted. After the war, when he was like 17, he still looked like he was about 11. They used his same picture from his the same picture from his German working card. They used on his passport because he looked the same. His growth was stunted. He was malnourished. Basically, he stayed like he was 11. Yeah.
For 6 years.
Yeah.
Uh, did you feel that what he went through affected his religious beliefs?
I think it did. Yeah. Exactly how, I'm not sure. I know that his father was committed to religion, and in fact, the other day, my father read a poem that he wrote when I was born, where he hoped that I would continue in the faith of his father. Um, but it's interesting. I'm not exactly sure how his experience affected his sense of religion or his sense, or the mechanics of religion.
Do you feel that knowing what his life was like during the Holocaust has affected your religious beliefs?
There are quite a few things that have affected my religious beliefs. And yes, the Holocaust is one of them. I mean, the 20th century as a whole is one of them. I tend to think of things in a more existentialist point of view, more of a Albert Camus type of point of view, more of a Benedict Spinoza point of view, where my personal belief is that it's not, religion is not in the rote performance of ritual. Religion is expressed in how people treat each other. The measure of a person is how they treat other human beings, not whether or not they wash their hands 3 times before cutting the challah. Yeah.
In thinking about your father, do you see him as fragile, or do you see him as strong? I mean, how do you...
Oh, he's been strong. He's been strong. Now, when he first started speaking about in public, to an audience, about his experiences, he used to break down and cry at several points. He doesn't do that anymore. At least not that I've noticed. One of the most particularly emotional things for him was talking about his liberation by the Ninth Army. That, even I would tear up, for that, But, yeah, I mean, I knew he always talked, like from an early age, well, my cousin, Chaim Farber was, he was caught by the Germans and they tortured him and all that. And I knew I knew basically what happened to everybody.
Have you gone to visit any of the places that figured in your father's experiences? The Tarnoff or Bergen-Belsen or any of those?
No, I haven't. And actually, I would like to. There was a time, in 1990, we visited Belgium and we visited France because my father made a friend in Belgium when he was there after the war. So we visited him. It was the first time that they'd seen each other since 1947. So that was an emotional moment. And one day we went up, we drove up to Amsterdam, we went to the Rijksmuseum. As we were driving back, I was the navigator, I kind of fell asleep, I was tired. And we almost ended up in Aachen, Germany. And my father had a fit that we almost crossed the German border.
So he hasn't been back to...
No, he has not. And I mean, there are places that I really want to see because... for example, the place where he was liberated, still, I've looked on the satellite images of Google Maps, it's still pretty much the way that it was in 1945. So I would like to see that.
And where is that?
Farelsleben. It's about 20 kilometers north of Magdeburg.
So you'd have to go into Germany, so
Oh yeah, I would like to go to Germany.
Right.
What was it? My father's first stop in Germany was Berlin at the train station. The Red Cross checked out the people from the train and sent them on their way. They stopped the train at the town of Celle, and they made them walk from there to Bergen-Belsen. But yeah, I mean, I would love to go to Germany. I'd love to see Bergen-Belsen. They have a museum there. I mean, there are various religious, I would like to say Kaddish there for those who didn't survive. My family is very unique in that the nuclear family stayed together for the entire war. It would be, so it's interesting, but yeah, I would like to say Kaddish there for the people who didn't survive Bergen-Belsen, the people who died of typhus, or who were murdered.
You mentioned that you've been to Israel. Do you
Yes.
see a connection between the founding of Israel and the Holocaust? Do you think there is a connection?
Uh, that's a good question, because when you ask people generally, they'll say, well, they made Israel because they were making it up to the Holocaust survivors and all that basically an oops, I'm sorry gift after the war. The thing about Israel is that, I mean, first of all, there had always been Jews living in that area, even after the Romans took most people out into slavery. There were still Jews living there, still a Jewish population. It was the Turks. Well, not the, I would say the Ottomans, not the Turks, because there's a very big difference between modern day Turkey and the Ottoman Empire. So it was the Ottomans who restricted where Jews were allowed to live, and all that type of thing. They took them out of there. They basically covered over half of Jerusalem. And built over it, and they, created Jewish population centers, and had and gave the Muslims access to the holy areas and things like that. That was under the Ottoman Empire. That was under Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent.
Well, what about you? Do you feel a connection to Israel? Do you?
Oh, I feel a connection to Israel, especially as half my family lives there.
So how often have you
And
been?
Israel, I feel a connection to Israel. Israel is the Jewish homeland. It always has been, and it always will be. But the connection between Israel and the Holocaust is an interesting question, because I don't think that it was the consolation prize. Because Israel was already in formation in 1921 with Lord Arthur Balfour, the foreign secretary, to King George V, declaring that there should be a Jewish state in Palestine. And then the League of Nations after World War I declared that Jewish Palestine would be everywhere from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean, because Palestine was tremendous. Jordan River to the Mediterranean, and Muslim Palestine would be from the Jordan River to the border of Iraq. Well, today we know that it's Jordan. Jordan declared itself in about 1932, and it wasn't recognized by the British or by the United Nations until 1952. Yeah, I feel a very strong tie to Israel, sure.
Have you participated in any second generation groups or programs?
No, not really. And here's the thing, I kind of have a problem with the term second generation. And that's because it makes it sound, second generation makes it sound like an update of an old version. It's Survivor 2.0. I prefer to call myself a secondary survivor of the Shoah. And that's because if you think about it as a natural disaster, if the Shoah was a 10.0 earthquake in history, which is pretty much what it was, I still live in the 5.3 aftershocks of it. That's basically the way my life has been. I mean, like I said, I know more about people who died 70, 75 years ago than I do about my own relatives that are alive today. So, yeah, I'm still waiting in it.
Have you found a way? I know your father paints and he writes poetry and he's written a book that was published by the center. Do you feel that your feelings about the Shoah come out in any art or writing? Have they?
Uh, well, I mean, I haven't really written anything about it, but I have, developed philosophy about the Shoah, and I've given up some quotes here and there.
So what is your philosophy about it?
Well, here's the thing, and this is what people have to understand. When people think about the Holocaust, they think of Adolf Hitler, they think of Adolf Eichmann, they think of Hermann Goering, they think of Heinrich Himmler, and they think that the Holocaust was committed by a group of about 7 lunatics in Berlin. Not so. The Holocaust was committed by your pharmacist. The Holocaust was committed by your mailman. The Holocaust was committed by your accountant. All of these people, see, here's the thing. When you live in a civilized society, we have rules. And things like mass murder are frowned upon. However, when ordinary people are given the license to commit mass murder, especially where there's a millennia-long history of prejudice to base it upon, where, and was it in 1935, Jews were stripped of their citizenship in Germany. When you have the other in society, and you have this there's always been tension over it. Given the chance, I mean, it may be an evolutionary thing because deep inside our brains is a scared little monkey who wants to hit the other monkey with a stick. Given the chance, ordinary people will do extraordinarily horrible things. That's just human nature. It may be a pessimistic view of human nature, but that is the nature of the human species. Think about it. Over 4.5 million years of human existence, aside from some tall buildings, the only other thing that human beings have ever really worked upon are a way to kill other human beings. It's just in our nature to do that. And you can see the same aggressive behavior between clans of chimpanzees, our closest living relative. Chimpanzees will beat each other with sticks, and they will cause death, if they to feel superior. So I think that is the darker side of human nature, and if you release the constraints of society on that darker part of human nature, man will go to that extreme.
Do you think Jews are in danger today, either in Israel or elsewhere in the world?
Oh, I think Jews are in danger, sure, in some places. Now, the funny thing is, I grew up in the 70s, which was the era of Jewish self-defense. After the Munich Olympics, every Jewish guy was learning karate and all sorts of stuff like that. You had organizations like the Jewish Defense League, and all the teaching self-defense classes. But the philosophy behind it is valid, and that is that given crimes against Jews, particularly against Jews, I'm just talking about Jews right now, given crimes against Jews, you cannot count on anybody to come in and save the day. And that includes the American government. I mean, we've even seen under, I forget whether it was the Bloomberg or the Giuliani administration, where in, what was it, Borough Park, Brooklyn, there was it somebody spray painted swastikas all over the place. They spray painted, they slashed tires on cars, they broke car windows, they wrote "Death to the Jews." You know, they spray painted swastikas, which I actually swastikas. I don't even like to use that term because that term sort of legitimizes the theory of Aryanism, because swastika is, if I'm not mistaken, a Sanskrit word. So that kind of plays into, I'll call it the Hakenkreuz, the broken cross. Yeah, so the police department declared that not as a hate crime, but as some youthful pranks, right? That was a youthful prank. But when some mentally disturbed guy was started burning Christmas wreaths on people's doors a couple of neighborhoods away in Brooklyn, that was a hate crime. And it turned out to be just a mentally disturbed guy who got loose, you know. Also, I mean, if you look at the city's handling of the Crown Heights riots under David Dinkins, and ironically, Raymond Kelly was the one left in charge because Lee Brown was back in Houston, and David Dinkins was somewhere else, as he normally was somewhere else when he was mayor. I mean, you look at the Crown Heights riots. What's his name? The killer of Yonkel Rosenbaum went free. You know, I mean, so there is some legitimacy to the theory that was around when I was growing up, which is that you can't really count on anybody to save you. You know, if you're a Jew and there are attacks on Jews.
So you should be able to save yourself.
Yeah, so you should be able to defend yourself if possible. I mean, that's the ethos of the JDL. The JDL eventually split into the JDO and the JDL. The JDO was run by Meir Kahane. Then there was the Kahane Chai group. Meir Kahane was assassinated. Who was mayor? Was it Koch? Or was it Giuliani? Oh, no, actually, it may have been Dinkins, once again, where Kahane was giving a speech at a hotel, and El Said Nosser went up to him and blew his brains out. And then he hijacked a taxi cab and made it a couple of blocks down before the police caught him. So where was the security detail for somebody like that? I mean, Kahane Chai was even outlawed in Israel at that time. Nobody wanted it. I mean, Kahane was toxic waste. But still, it proved the point. Nobody's going to help you.
Why did you feel that you wanted to do this interview, be part of this project? Had you ever spoken about being the child of a survivor before, or your feelings about your father's past before?
In public? No, never.
So then, this is the first time you're really doing this.
Yes, this is the first time.
And why did you agree to it now?
Because I think there are some things that need to be said. You know, I think that, I mean, the Holocaust, the Shoah, is not something that, I mean, it's an event that happened 70 years ago. But like throwing a stone into a pond, there are ripples. And like I said, I think that everybody, society, basically has to be on its guard to, as Abraham Lincoln said, appeal to the angels of its better nature, because when given the license to go at, when given the license, man will resort to mass murder. And also, genocide is an interesting term, because a lot of things are called genocides, even though a lot of things that are called genocides are actually land disputes, which is an interesting thing. Now, genocide, if you break it down, is a part of the human tree, and so you have to have the intent to kill that part of the human tree. Now, in land disputes, that's not the intent. The intent is to acquire land or acquire political power, as such. But for a true genocide, your intent, because every attempt, this was attempted genocide. Every attempt requires intent, and murder is a specific intent crime. And so you have to have the specific intent to wipe out an entire portion of the human family tree. And the Shoah uniquely falls into that situation. The war between the Hutus and the Tutsis in Africa, I believe, also falls into that category, because one tribe was just trying to wipe out another tribe. It wasn't even as much about land. It wasn't really as much about government control as it was just eliminating an entire tribe, and 800,000 people died. That was under Clinton's watch.
Do you think that the lessons from the Holocaust are being passed down to younger generations in a way that might help stop some of the genocide, or not?
In a way, it depends, because, normally in some course that you're bound to take in college, Elie Wiesel's Night is going to be, on the reading list. But this nugget of human nature, I don't think is passed down, because I don't think that